Hi, this is Mike from thesubstream.com, and it's Snowpocalypse 2011. And this is a review of Peter Weir's The Way Home. I mean, The Way Back. Filmmakers have been making, especially in the past 10 years, but kind of for as long as cinema's been around, these interesting movies about human endurance. And that's because these long journeys through the desert or through the mountains or the wasteland or solo treks or being stuck in a canyon and having to cut off your own arm have metaphorical heft. They're handy ways to talk about things that you can't talk about just with dialogue, about the human condition and perseverance and spirit and stuff like that. One of the most interesting ones is from 2002, and it's Gus Van Sant's Jerry, in which Ben Affleck's younger brother, Casey Affleck, and Matt Damon go on this almost silent kind of trek out in the desert where they, one of them anyways, eventually kind of dies. It's an extremely beautiful, extremely slow, meditative movie that made a lot of people, including my mother, leave during screenings, especially at the Toronto Film Festival when it premiered in 2001 or 2002. And then you go fast forward 8 years later to Danny Boyle making the kind of Hollywood version of Jerry when he made 127 Hours, which is nominated for a bunch of Oscars. And that movie is kind of the more Hollywood version. But both of those movies, the Gus Van Sant film and the Danny Boyle film, use this kind of idea of the human body being put to the extreme test and having to do horrible things to yourself and your friend, being put up against nature as a way of talking not only about a story, but about what characters mean, what you can actually make a movie out of, whether or not you can make a movie out of two people walking silently in the desert or one guy trapped with only himself to talk to inside a canyon, and what constitutes a story that's worth telling, especially in the cinema. And Peter Weir's film, the new film, The Way Back, is kind of halfway between those two films. It's not as experimental or as beautiful as Gus Van Sant's Jerry, and it's not as Hollywood kind of frenetic traditional story structure as Danny Boyle's 127 Hours. That being said, it's still really, really, really interesting, and it's kind of a neat, subtly experimental, but still strongly narrative and entertaining picture. It's about four guys that end up walking out of a Siberian gulag at the beginning of the Second World War, and because once they escape, there's still nowhere to go. They're in the middle of Russian Siberia with China to the south. They have to walk thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers to find the first free country they can get to, which ends up being India. And Peter Weir makes this incredibly interesting movie that ends up being about the actual journey, about the actual accomplishment. It's not about the characters in any real way. Kind of important characters appear and then disappear with not much backstory and not much explanation of what happens to them after they walk kind of camera left. And it's not really about the beauty of empty spaces cinematically speaking either, because it's impressively shot, it looks very nice, but it's not kind of standard. There's no tricky camera effects or awe-inspiring cinematography like there is in the Gus Van Sant film. It's squarely between those two films, but it's just as interesting as either. It's not as good as either, but it is as interesting an experiment as either, and it's worth watching if you've got to spare a couple of hours this week and can find it in the theaters. That's all. Now I freeze to death and die. Snowpocalypse. Why did you kill me?